can we find a way to actually tell the optimistic story of AI, which is, yes, in some areas of the organization, we're going to slow down headcount growth. In other areas of the organization, maybe there'll be fewer people, at the end of this. But in other areas, we're actually going to be growing and we're going to be reinvesting and reallocating dollars.
I want to talk about agents, because you have very kind of loudly and prominently declared that we are entering the agentic era.
Yeah.
And
I feel like that's like a well-understood theme at this point in this.
Well, there's a lot to talk about it.
Okay.
But eras are a big thing. I mean, Paleolithic, Neolithic, Iron Age.
Yes.
Why do agents deserve their own era?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think we'll figure out if in time it's at that level of Paleolithic. But I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a massive transformation in the world of work. And basically it's the shift of software has always been deterministic. So, it kind of does exactly what you want it to do every single time. And that has a lot of great properties, but it also has a lot of limitations. It can't adapt to new information. It can't adapt to, any amount of kind of unstructured data and input that it receives. It has to be highly structured. And so, we kind of were able to automate, 5% of a company's operations. We can automate the ERP operation. We can automate sort of managing workflows around our CRM or kind of IT workflows. But actually most of work is this sort of messy, unstructured, human, collaborative, lots of different kind of data types coming in, and we've never been able to automate any of that. And so if you just did a heat map of all the work that happens in the world, the vast majority, probably like 95% of the work that we do is inherently unstructured, and for the first time ever, AI allows us to bring automation to that part of the work.
Yeah.
And so it just stands to reason that obviously that is the biggest shift that we'll ever see in kind of corporate work.
Bigger than previous waves of automation.
Easily, by orders of magnitude, and so it sort of certainly deserves its own way of kind of thinking about what that future of the information age is going to look like. It's actually interesting. We probably called the information age too early in retrospect. We thought computers would bring about the information age, and it kind of did, but it meant that people were always the dependency for actually working with the information. And now with agents, agents can work 24/7 in parallel on any amount of data. So that really starts to usher in the full potential of the information age.
Can you do a quick definition? Nicolas Lamoureux was on the stage earlier. He said 95% of what people say is agents right now.
Yeah.
Isn't agents. Would you agree with that?
Maybe like 92%. So I
you guys can fight that one out later. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of that. This is going to be very messy terminology-wise, just for a variety of reasons. And but by virtue of me having the microphone right now, I'll make the real definition of agents.
You can do it.
But I think everybody can kind of feel it, like when you go to a chatbot and you ask a question, you get an answer back. It's sort of okay. It's kind of like an assistant chatbot thing. I think we are collectively as an industry agreeing that an agent is probably something that can do a bit more than that. And so the general architecture that you should expect from any kind of agentic system is it's still an LLM by and large behind the scenes, but that LLM or AI model has access to a set of tools. Those tools could be your software. They could be specific, very narrow, just one-off kind of tasks that they can do. And you can run that agent in effectively LLM for a minute, 10 minutes, an hour, 10 hours. It can take in various inputs from your systems and make decisions on its own. And so essentially there's some element of both autonomy and this ability to do kind of continuous work.
Yeah.
And that makes it so you're not just, you're not dependent on your ability to go back and forth with the assistant. You're able to give it a task. It can go off across your systems or to some extent even into the outside world and then go and complete that task. So and that's probably the new definition that I think we're all converging.
And so there's something I find very confusing in this conversation because on the one hand, you just said it.
Yeah.
you're going to have this agent that can go out and make decisions on its own. On the other hand, everybody says, oh, but there's always going to be a human in the loop.
Yes.
Well, if the agent is making decisions on its own, there's
Yes.
not a human in the loop. So
Yeah.
sort of help us through that.
Yeah, this is actually one of the, I would say, unresolved issues of all of AI, which is, I think we all agree that at some point you need some degree of accountability. The agent can basically never be accountable because it has no real tension in its system about making the wrong mistake. You know, it has a reward function when it's being trained, so it wants to.
Accountability has to lie with human beings.
I mean, all of our laws are set up to require that. So at the end of the day, I can't sue Anthropic when it does something wrong. It has like the T's and C's of Anthropic, you know, are impenetrable. Like you will never get a dollar out of Anthropic.
Not to digress too much, but does that mean you agree with Anthropic in its dispute with the Defense Department?
That would be a digression. So, but why don't we come back to that? But like that's a whole thing I'd have to unpack.
But it's basically about accountability, right? It's like, can you have truly autonomous weapons?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like who are you assuming needs the accountability in that model. But let's
okay. We'll park that.
More pedestrian, non-nuclear missile use cases. I can't. I can't hold an agent accountable for a hiring decision, for writing code that's buggy, for making a loan that was wrong.
Yeah.
You can only hold either the institution or the ultimate individual that made that decision. So we do have a paradox. This is an unresolved paradox of AI, which is as an agent does more and more work in the background, that's how you get productivity gains. If you're just going back and forth and you're constrained by your ability to go back and forth with the agent, then there's limited productivity upside. It's like, you'll get like 20% productivity upside or something like that. If an agent can go off and actually do like real hours of work in the equivalent of hours of work in minutes, now you're talking could be 2x, 5x, 10x productivity gain. The challenge is it's going to make a series of decisions that are going to be harder and harder to kind of parse all the little tiny elements that it used across that decision. And so the human in the loop element, we have greater degrees of abstraction of what the human in the loop is able to really process. And so the most extreme case that's happening in Silicon Valley right now in engineering, you can kind of look to engineering as effectively the benchmark of like where AI is going. Now there's going to be a longer gap as it's actually going to be interesting. The faster you see things change in engineering, you'll actually see a wider gap between the rest of the world and what it's going to take to get the rest of the world to be able to use agents like engineering. So it's not like these are going to be fast follows in the rest of knowledge work, and we can get into why if you want. But if you look at engineering, about a year ago, let's say, it was like completely the best practice. Everybody agreed you have to review the code that the agent did. And then we said, oh, actually, maybe what we'll do is we'll have an agent review the code that another agent wrote. And then you'll just review the final review of that agent that did the review. And now, at the real state of the art of like the fastest moving startups are kind of in the position of saying, like, if the thing tests, and is verified as test complete, like we're gonna ship it. And the human, because a human can no longer look through 50,000 lines of code.
And do you think they've gone too far, or you think that's okay?
Depends on what kind of system you're working on. Yeah. Like, and this is actually this might get a little closer to the Pentagon thing.
Yeah.
Like, I actually wouldn't do that type of approach for missiles. Would I do that for an internal form where you had to build a quick application for some employee experience thing? A lot probably safer. A lot riskier if it's a trading platform, if it's a healthcare system, if it's a government weapons system. A lot harder to do that.
And the truth is, we probably make those kinds of decisions all the time. How closely do you read that contract? How closely do you 100%. Read that language?
But the big difference is I can still hold you accountable for not reading that contract.
If you didn't do it, you're accountable.
And so this is the fun paradox. This is where the tension's going to get, and we are going to be. You all are going to be like at the center of this. It's going to be hilarious. So
they're having a great time.
So we're going to be like full throttle. We have to go AI first in everything.
Yeah.
At the exact same time, when AI takes down your website, you're gonna be like, well, I have to. Who do we blame? And eventually, you're gonna find you probably have to blame the engineer that used AI
went full throttle.
That went full throttle. But then they're going to say, you were the one that told me to go full throttle. And we're going to have this loop for a while, and this is why there's no free lunch in automation.
Fun times ahead.
It's going to be really fun times.
No way out of it.
Yeah, and so you're gonna say, shoot, you were reckless in using agents to write that thing that took down the site, but we did technically tell you to do that, and so is that a good performance review or a bad one?
You're saying this is just how we learn.
I don't even know what the end state is. Nobody does.
Yeah, but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen because the productivity gains are simply too significant if you don't, by doing so. But we do have a bunch of really interesting new problems that we as organizations and sort of best practices haven't yet resolved. I mean, there's going to be even like new forms of insurance, and there'll be the new form of cyber insurance will be agent insurance, and you'll basically say, I'm going to buy, $1 billion of protection on if agents do something, and so the economy will find interesting, clever ways to kind of figure
just
this
throw
out.
it forward 3, 4, 5 years. What is work going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, if you look at the microcosm of engineering, it gives you the best hint again about what the future is probably going to look like, with again massive caveats. But in general, and I think we're all kind of collectively getting this sense, we should anticipate that the knowledge worker of today is sort of the manager of agents of the future. So the individual contributor becomes the manager. What they are managing is a set of AI agents to help them sort of execute more work than they could have before. And so you can kind of just imagine and posit what that will be for every role in a business. The brand.
You think most people will be just managing agents, not so much people?
Well, I guess at some point there'll be a person managing people managing agents.
Yeah.
But even there's an interesting tendency now in engineering where you probably want your frontline managers also to be practitioners more, partly because there's a fluency in using these tools that is really important for them, and also because it's just like once you have a really strong, we all do this, which is like you take your really good engineer and you turn them into a manager. But then all of a sudden, that really good engineer no longer is producing any code, and it's like, that's too bad. Like, that person was actually an expert in what they were doing. And now AI kind of gives them the ability to probably still have a player-coach type dynamic where they can be doing more and more output as well individually. So that's probably important because it keeps them fluent with the technology, and they're not just in meetings with people, but they're actually using the tools themselves. So I think you're going to see that as a practice. Commonly in engineering, but that will ripple through other areas as well.
I want to pivot here and talk about you. I'm glad you talk fast, by the way, because we have a limited amount of time and getting a lot of information into this. But I want to talk about you because we're using this interview for the Leadership podcast.
Okay.
And I have to ask you some questions about your leadership. You started Bucks.
I like the agent stuff better. So
you do?
Yeah,
Maybe we'll come back to it if we
okay,
have
cool.
time.
Okay.
But you started your company. You were at USC. You were 19 years old. USC, I guess everybody else was partying. You were starting a company.
There were a couple of us. There were a couple of people not partying, yes.
And you left. But why? What drove you to do that?
Basically, I'd been trying lots of startup ideas many times throughout high school and college, and most of them just didn't work, obviously. And this was the first one that did work. And it kind of worked in a way that was the first time like there was a flywheel where we would build a feature, we get more customers, we do more we talk to more customers, and it kind of kept kind of compounding.
It's just a place to put your content and organize.
Yeah, I mean the idea was like quite simple. It just like everybody had been sitting on it and not actually executing it, which is like the internet can store data now. You want to be able to access your data from anywhere. So we were like, well, let's just put 2 and 2 together and like build a product that does that. So we kind of got in pretty early, and we eventually pivoted in the enterprise. But we sort of started as a broad-based tool for anybody to use it for sharing and collaborating on data.
I want to talk about the pivot to the enterprise because that happened 2007,
yes,
2008.
Exactly. Yeah.
At a time when enterprise business was not cool.
Yes.
I mean, I have a very clear memory of Steve Jobs coming to the Wall Street Journal with the first model of the iPhone.
Yes.
And we were all sitting there with our BlackBerries, in the room, and he passed these iPhones around, and people played with them a little bit. And somebody in the room, one of the editors said, "This isn't going to work for the enterprise."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he just stared him down and said, I'm not going to repeat the word he used, but it starts with an F. I don't give an F about the enterprise.
Yes.
And that was kind of the whole Silicon Valley jive.
Yes.
So what drove you to do what everybody else thought was uncool?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was, partly out of necessity, and then eventually, actually, we convinced ourselves it was cool. So, like, we for a while there, we had sort of a separation between what was in our head versus obviously the rest of the world, and what we were thinking was, why not do the Steve Jobs thing of build really great software, but specifically, like, what if you could bring that into the enterprise, and what if you could actually upgrade the enterprise software stack of an organization to be much more consumer-like, as opposed to the traditional problems of enterprise software. Like, and then that just fed itself, because then it was like, oh, well, that's actually an even bigger opportunity, because that's uniquely differentiated. Because traditional enterprise software was kind of slow, cumbersome, hard to use. It didn't have the best designers. So we said, well, what if we just built consumer-like software aimed directly at the enterprise? That would be actually extra differentiated and a kind of an intellectually interesting problem as well. So that kind of was the early days of this idea of consumerization of IT. We don't really talk about that anymore, but that was a thing with Slack and Yammer and Zoom and this sort of next generation of.
You were happy with that decision.
We had no other choice. So again, out of necessity, this was the strategy. But we convinced ourselves like that it was cool. And again, you just you tell yourself something enough and you're fine. So.
You were a kid building this company. Where did you learn leadership? Did you have a mentor? Did you have a coach? Were there any books you read that influenced you? How did you think about running a company?
Yeah, I mean, lots of books actually, and then fortunately in Silicon Valley, like people were generally pretty generous to the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I got to get great feedback from a lot of the kind of enterprise software leaders.
Any books or individuals that you would cite in particular?
Yeah. So, kind of like all the books.
You read a lot.
I actually have been reading less and less. Unfortunately, I do have this new Twitter problem where your brain just can't read things. But back in the day, I literally read every book. So every management book, all the things, and we sort of scrapped some things. We didn't scrap others. Clayton Christensen, Jeffrey Moore, Michael Porter, anybody who had done business thinking, we probably read.
Anybody in the Valley who was particularly important in sort of guiding your thinking?
We were fortunate to have folks like Benioff. Early on was a great advisor.
He gives a lot of his time and effort to mentoring.
He's remarkably generous with his time for the next generation of entrepreneurs. So people like Mark Benioff. I've spent time with Tom Siebel of just tell me how the hardcore days of enterprise software. I'd say that genre of individual I tried to get as much information and best practices from.
Anything you know about building a company today that you wish you had known 20 years ago when you started this?
Actually, mostly things that if I had known, I probably wouldn't have built a company. So it's actually a good thing I didn't know. And it's actually funny. So one of my worst performing grades was I had only finally kind of declared business undergrad at USC, but one of my classes for that was organizational behavior.
Yeah.
And I probably got a C minus. So I was like, oh man, what are all these meetings and people that you have to talk to and these you have to give performance reviews. What is going on? So if I had known all of that, yeah.
And that's the ball game.
That's the ball game.
Organizational management.
That is the ball game. So.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've gotten good at it over the last 20 years?
No, 100%. But we have a great chief people officer, and she does an amazing job. And I mostly try and get out of her way, but sometimes I get in her way, and we go back and forth like that.
I'm going to come back to that before we end. But what's the biggest mistake you made over the last 20 years in building your company?
I think probably, and this is unfortunately it's just generic, but I think everything that any kind of decision that we were sitting on too long, this is sort of classic, but I think it just is true. It's like if I had to be honest, it's usually just the decisions that you should have made faster, and I think it's timeless. It's transcends every company.
It's just human.
It's
take too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the chief people officer question.
Yeah.
Because you say you don't like organizational management. You didn't fail it, but you got a C-. That's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Maybe at USC that counts as failing. Yet you know it's really important. You have a great chief people officer. You're talking to a room of chief people officers.
Yeah.
What's
hostile territory. Okay.
Yeah. What's your advice to them
Yeah.
on how to navigate this new era that we're in?
I think it's an incredibly exciting position to be in because of like how intellectually interesting this moment is going to be, and almost like there's going to be a lot of things that are totally timeless, like the way you work with a human is probably pretty timeless. So I don't think like there's a lot of changes on that. I think it's mostly going to be the pace of change that is going to start to happen in your organization,
which most people are not good with.
Yeah, most people are not good with. We kind of want our thing to just be exactly the same process that it used to be, and the same timeline that it used to be, and the same onboarding workflow that it used to be, and so that all of a sudden kind of goes up by 5x. Yeah. This new problem of like how do you manage the trade-offs between people and agents? This is just the hardest problem of I think any organization going forward, which is like, do you hire 100 engineers or do you hire 80 engineers and put the 20 delta into compute for agents? And that decision has to get made in 100% of your organization.
And these are the people who have to make that decision. What does technology do? What does people do? So give them some guidance on how to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 minutes left.
You got to do this. You got 30 seconds for this one. I got some more questions.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's tough. I would. I'll just tell you, the rough philosophy that we have, and every company's going to be different because you have to be like, are you in growth mode? Are you in kind of profitability mode? Every company kind of lands at a different spot. I do think the thing that Silicon Valley has done a poor job of, because we're all kind of running around scrambling on this new technology is. And I think that's going to be actually a bad thing for actually the industry itself that we've done such a poor job on this. So it'll be funny because it'll kind of come back and bite us. I actually think this is a technology that has, like, by and large, optimistic outcomes. Yeah. But we as an industry have sort of probably scared the world so much about this. And so I to the extent that you can thread this needle, it's going to be hard. But the way that we think about AI is essentially 90% of the way that we think about it is we want to use it to do more things. And we want to use it to ship more code faster, better marketing campaigns, serve our customers better, even in areas where we are going to go save money. Like it's undeniable that you'll have probably fewer people in the front line of customer support that take in like an email password change request. We want to take those dollars and put those into customer success, where you have outbound, proactive individuals that are going to go in and actually partner with our customers. So we look at every opportunity where we have automation and we say, can we automate something to free up dollars to go and actually do the thing that we couldn't have done before? And there's actually areas already in the organization where the fact that we're using AI is causing us to hire more in that same area, because it's lowering the cost of doing something that we would not have been able to do like the full thing of. So like in many areas of marketing, we would not have been we would not have conceived of like all of the marketing content that we now produce pre-AI, and so we wouldn't have been able to build as much of a video team, let's say, previously, because we just we're not going to get our arms around all of the kind of costs it takes.
And now you can.
And now you can, because AI all of a sudden gets you that 2x or 5x productivity gain. So I think the thing that probably behooves a lot of us is, can we find a way to actually tell the optimistic story of AI, which is, yes, in some areas of the organization, we're going to slow down headcount growth. In other areas of the organization, maybe there'll be fewer people, at the end of this. But in other areas, we're actually going to be growing and we're going to be reinvesting and reallocating dollars. And I think that we've been in this sort of myopic period right now where it looks like it's all sort of taking away. And I think we're going to see that actually a lot of the use cases are going to expand what we end up doing, and thus the people that you need to do those things.
All right, Aaron, speed round.
Yeah.
I mean, everything with you is a little bit of a speed round, but this
will
is even more of a speed round. One job AI won't replace.
I have a long list, unfortunately, but
pick the
chief people officers.
There you go. Good. Okay. Well, very good pick.
Maybe something more impactful headcount size wise. I think that there's a lot of anything that interfaces with the outside world that requires any degree of proactiveness. So, i.e., it's not just a reactive inbound customer support request. I don't think sales is going away. I don't think professional services is going away. I don't think customer success is going away, because at the end of the day, you can automate the software creation, the PowerPoint deck creation, the what are we going to propose to the customer, but you're still going to be in a
This
meeting.
is the speed round.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Best movie you've seen recently.
Recently?
You don't watch movies.
I do watch movies. I have a little bit of an issue with Hollywood and in some of the stuff that they're coming up with. So
we'll pass it. What's your morning exercise routine?
Morning exercise routine. I lift this coffee cup and like at least 5 to 8 times. So
what's your most used app?
By minutes, probably Twitter, and by megabytes, Box. So.
And on the bots, are you polite when you talk to them?
On the bots?
Yeah.
Yes, I still am.
You say please. You say thank you.
Yeah.
You were well raised. Do you think of yourself as interested in speed or interested in perfection?
Oh, that's tough. That one's very tough, actually, because a lot of times speed, and a few times in high leverage areas perfection.
And you have to be wise about choosing which is where.
Yeah.
Best advice you ever received?
Best advice I ever received. Well, probably the best startup advice was from Mark Cuban that we got very early on, which was don't hedge your bets. And it mostly applies to a startup, but it feels like that, for us right now, which is
all in.
You got to go all in, because when you kind of dilute and try and balance two kind of opposite kind of approaches, you're just gonna guarantee to fail because you've just split your kind of work too much. So that's probably truly the best advice we ever got.
Great conversation.
Thank you
so much.
Good to see you.